Russia has targeted cities across Ukraine in its latest wave of drone attacks. Once again, air raid sirens have sounded in Kyiv as the capital came under fire. Now, drones have also struck a university campus in the Black Sea port city of Odesa, and in the frontline Kherson region, Russian shelling hit civilian infrastructure, killing and wounding dozens. A warning that our next report does contain disturbing images.
A train station, a hardware store, a supermarket. Civilian infrastructure in Ukraine's Kherson region hit by Russian rockets.
I saw 2 people dead. I can't remember anything else. It was as if I was deaf. Everything was so dusty and smoky, pure panic.
More than 20 civilians were killed in the attacks, dozens more injured, among them children. Nightfall and more strikes in other parts of the country. Ukrainian authorities say Russia launched dozens of deadly drones against Odesa and the capital Kyiv. Speaking from the Netherlands, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky condemned the attacks. Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte promised to deliver Ukraine more military support, possibly including fighter jets.
On the F-16s, no taboos. We are working intensely with our partners, Belgium, others, the UK, Denmark, on getting that debate somehow to a conclusion.
President Zelensky expressed his gratitude, but stressed his country needed more than just weapons. He visited the International Criminal Court in The Hague, which has an outstanding warrant for Russian President Vladimir Putin's arrest.
We all want to see different Vladimir here, in The Hague, the one who deserves to be sentenced for these criminal actions.
Zelensky said he wanted a tribunal similar to the Nuremberg trials after World War II. He said without justice, peace would not be possible.
To hear more about President Zelensky's trip, I spoke earlier to Lesia Vasilenko, a member of the Ukrainian parliament, and I asked her what Zelensky is trying to achieve this time.
Definitely to get ongoing and stronger support for Ukraine, because for the counteroffensive to happen on the ground, we need the means to carry it out with. We need not just the weapons, but the ammunition that go with, and we need a strong air defense. The F-16s, the president makes it clear in every single one of his addresses, be it personal, be it through the international media, we need our skies covered, and the only way to achieve this is with F-16 fighter jets or their equivalent.
Now, Ukraine's Western supporters are nervous that if they send F-16s, if they send long-range rockets to Ukraine, that Kyiv could use them to hit targets inside of Russia, and that would dramatically escalate the conflict. Do you feel that there's enough trust from European partners?
Russia has engaged over 300,000 men, soldiers on the ground in Ukraine. They continue to launch drones and missiles of various ranges across Ukraine to hit cities and to hit civilians. They are holding hostage and in occupation one of the largest nuclear power plants in Europe. And all of this is happening here on the ground in Ukraine. So let me ask you this. Do you think Ukraine has an attention span, enough resources to hit into Russia? Do we need to do that when so much of our areas are occupied? No. Our focus, our only focus, is to get rid of the Russian invaders in the territory of Ukraine, push them back, reinforce our borders, and continue existing as a free and democratic country.
And on this trip, do you think Zelensky then has been hearing what Ukraine wants to hear from European allies?
I think he has some very intense dialogues, especially personal ones that are not being communicated to the outside with the leaders of the Western European states. And I hope that he comes back with positive messages. First of all, positive messages that he is going to announce to Zaluzhny, who is our chief of staff, our commander of our army, and that this counteroffensive that everyone is hoping for will go ahead through the summer, bringing back much of the Ukrainian territories and mainly the Ukrainian people under the freedom of the Ukrainian flag.
Yeah, I want to ask you more about that expected spring offensive that you've mentioned. Is that partly to do with the timing of Zelensky's trip? Is he in Western Europe meeting these leaders in order to make it possible for this counteroffensive to finally begin?
I wouldn't have the details on that. This is classified state secret information. When the offensive begins, where it begins, definitely not something to discuss in public. I'm sorry.
That's fine. Let's speak instead then about one of Zelensky's comments from yesterday. He has acknowledged that he doesn't think it's realistic for Ukraine to join NATO while there's an active conflict ongoing with Russia. But he has said that he wants clearer signals from allies that Ukraine will be a member after the war. Is that also what this trip is about?
I think so. In Ukraine, there is a growing, very strong already support for Ukraine joining NATO and joining the EU. Today, almost 90% of the population are in full support of Ukraine becoming a full-fledged member. Just less than 1.5 years ago, these numbers were around 40-50%. This is just for the understanding of how support and confidence in NATO but also in the EU has grown over the last year. So yes, for the Ukrainians, for Ukrainian government, the president, it's a priority to see Ukraine become a full-fledged member.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us on DW News. We really appreciate it. That is Lesia Vasilenko, a member of Ukrainian parliament. And we often hear that the Russian invasion of Ukraine has transformed NATO military thinking. In the last 2 weeks, proof of that has been playing out in the form of joint exercises in the high north. Warships, aircraft, and submarines from 10 NATO countries have been training together. DW's Alexandra von Nahmen reports.
NATO naval ships in action. Dynamic Mongoose is a high-speed submarine hunting exercise in the North Atlantic. We are on board a Danish frigate to observe firsthand how units from different NATO nations train together in a challenging environment.
This area that we conduct Dynamic Mongoose in, across the gap between Iceland, the Faroes, where we're operating around today, the Faroe Islands, and Norway, is a key area for us to understand how to conduct anti-submarine warfare. So we have to get out here and we have to do it. You can't do these things in a trainer. You have to see what the environment is like.
The job here, for example, is to precisely locate an enemy submarine using a sophisticated sonar. These are the skills needed to meet a growing Russian threat. Shocked by the war in Ukraine, NATO allies have made the biggest overhaul of their defense plans since the Cold War, putting more than 300,000 troops on high alert.
NATO allies hold exercises like this one on a regular basis, and their goal is always to make their forces more capable and cohesive. And now it is also to make sure that their strength is more visible to Russia. The message is clear. The alliance is committed to defending every inch of its territory.
The maritime group under the command of Rear Admiral Torsten Marx is part of the so-called Very High Readiness Joint Task Force that would be deployed in case of an attack on NATO territory.
We are always capable and able to move in whenever the security of the alliance is threatened by someone. I also see that there is a growing interest by the allies to send units to my task group. As I have seen over the past months, a very positive force flow that will continue over the year. And it's my responsibility to train and work these forces up to the highest standard.
NATO is more vigilant today than it has been in the past, Rear Admiral Marx and other officers here told us. And with an increasing number of allies willing to spend more money on their forces, Russia's war on Ukraine looks to have woken up the alliance and reminded it of what it stands for: collective defense of all its members.
In Ukraine, the Air Force says it has shot down one of its own drones that went out of control over the capital, Kyiv. Footage shows the aircraft being fired upon and then exploding in midair before crashing to the ground. The Air Force said they believe the Turkish-made drone had lost control due to a technical malfunction.